The silent wish, the night before Ana de Armas's birthday, was quiet, but inside her heart there was a storm. She sat by the window of her small apartment, staring at the city lights. Everyone thought she was happy. Everyone believed her life was perfect because of the fame, the red carpets, and the cameras that followed her every step. But on that night, she felt something missing. Birthdays had always been heavy for her, not because of age, but because she longed for something simple that money or fame could never buy. She longed for someone who would see her as just Ana, not the star, not the actress, not the image. Meanwhile, across the city, Keanu Reeves was preparing something quietly. He had learned long ago that the most powerful gestures are never shouted. They are whispered through kindness and care. He remembered the way Ana once spoke about her childhood birthdays, how they were filled with warmth even though her family had very little. Her eyes had glowed when she described the homemade cake, the laughter, and the small surprises that were never about money, but always about love. Keanu knew this was what she truly missed, and that was what he wanted to give her. When the clock struck midnight, Ana's phone began to fill with messages, glamorous wishes from friends, fans, and producers. She smiled politely, but her heart still felt empty. Then she heard a knock at her door. It was soft, almost hesitant, as if the person on the other side respected her silence. She opened it and found a small box on the floor. No one was standing there. She looked down, curious, and picked it up. Inside was a single candle and a note written in the simplest words. "A wish belongs to you, not to the world. Keep it close." Her heart trembled because the handwriting was familiar. Ana stepped outside, and there, standing in the hallway, was Keanu. He was not dressed like a star, not in expensive clothes, not with bodyguards or photographers around. He was just himself, carrying a small paper bag and an awkward smile. "Happy birthday, Ana," he said softly, almost as if he was afraid to disturb her night. She blinked, her throat heavy with emotion, and invited him inside. Inside the apartment, Keanu pulled out a cake that looked far from perfect. It was small, uneven, and clearly homemade. Ana covered her mouth, her eyes filling with tears. She laughed softly, not because the cake was funny, but because it was real. "Did you make this?" she asked. Keanu nodded shyly, admitting he had never baked before, but wanted to try. The thought of Keanu Reeves, a man admired by millions, struggling in his kitchen just to make a cake for her, struck her heart like nothing else. They lit the candle together. The flame was gentle, flickering in the dim room. "Make a wish," Keanu whispered. Ana closed her eyes, and for the first time in years her wish felt genuine. She did not wish for success or fame. She wished for moments like this, pure and unshaken by the noise of the world. As the night went on, they talked about their lives, about the weight of being seen but not understood, about mistakes, fears, and the loneliness hidden behind smiles. Keanu listened with quiet respect, never interrupting, never judging. He shared his own battles, the times he had fallen, the times he had carried grief in silence. The more he spoke, the more Ana realized that pain and kindness could exist together, and that was what made a soul beautiful. But just when the night felt safe, a sudden message on Ana's phone changed her expression. It was from someone in her past, someone who once hurt her deeply. Her hands shook, her smile faded, and Keanu noticed. He did not ask questions. He simply placed his hand gently on hers and said, "You are not alone anymore." Those words broke the walls she had, built around her heart. In that single moment, Ana realized that birthdays were never about gifts or parties. They were about presence, about someone standing beside you when the world tried to break you down. Keanu had given her more than surprises. He had given her peace. And yet, deep inside, neither of them knew that this night was only the beginning. What started as a simple birthday surprise would soon turn into a journey of trials, misunderstandings, unexpected conflicts, and lessons that would test their resilience, their humility, and their bond. But for now, under the glow of a single candle, Anna smiled in a way she had not smiled in years. The shadows of the past, the morning after her birthday, Anna woke up with the faint smell of cake still lingering in her apartment. Her heart felt lighter than it had in years. She remembered Keanu's smile, his quiet words, and the warmth of his presence. She touched the empty coffee mug he had used the night before, still sitting on the table, and for the first time in a long while, she felt her home was not just walls and furniture, but a place that had been touched by real care. Yet, in the back of her mind, the message she received the night before still haunted her. As she scrolled through her phone, the words glared back at her. "You will never escape me." It was from someone she had tried to forget, a shadow from her past. It was not about love, but control. Years ago, she had trusted someone who betrayed her, someone who had treated her kindness as weakness. She had buried those memories under her success, but the message pulled them back into the present. Her breath quickened, and a familiar fear crept inside her. She tried to shake it off, telling herself she was stronger now. But no matter how many times she whispered those words, her hands still trembled. Later that day, Keanu called to check on her. His voice was calm, steady, and filled with the same quiet care she had seen in his eyes. "How are you feeling today?" he asked. Anna wanted to lie, to say she was fine, but something in his tone made her pause. She told him about the message. There was a silence on the other side of the line, but it was not empty. It was heavy with concern. "Anna," Keanu said softly, "you don't have to face this alone. If someone tries to take away your peace, you fight back, but you don't. Fight alone." His words gave her strength, yet she still felt the storm rising inside. That evening, they met again. Keanu brought her to a small park far from the noise of the city. The trees swayed gently, and the air was filled with the sound of children laughing in the distance. It was a simple place, but simplicity had a way of healing wounds. They sat on a bench, and Keanu listened as Anna poured out pieces of her past. She spoke about how she had been manipulated, how trust had been broken, and how fear had shaped her silence for years. Tears rolled down her face, but she did not hide them. She felt safe enough to be vulnerable. Keanu did not try to fix her pain with easy words. Instead, he offered his presence, and sometimes presence is stronger than any solution. Then came the twist that neither expected. As the sun began to set, Anna received another message. This time, it was not just words. It was a photo of the two, of them from the night before, standing in the hallway with the cake. Her heart froze. Someone had been watching them. She looked at Keanu with panic in her eyes. He took the phone gently from her hand, his jaw tightening, but his voice remained calm. "We will face this," he said firmly. "No one has the right to steal your peace, not even from the shadows." For the first time in years, Anna felt a mix of fear and strength together. Fear because the past had returned in a cruel way, but strength because Keanu stood beside her. She saw in his eyes not just kindness, but resilience. The same resilience he had spoken about when he shared his own struggles. He had lost. He had suffered. Yet he had chosen kindness again and again. She realized this was not weakness. This was power. A power she needed to learn. That night, as she lay in bed, she thought about how quickly life could change. Yesterday, her birthday had been filled with light, but today, shadows tried to return. Yet something inside her was different. She was no longer the same Anna who suffered in silence. She had found a friend who respected her truth, and she was beginning to respect her own strength as well. But the story was far from over. The days ahead would test them both in ways they could not yet imagine. Kindness would be challenged by cruelty, trust would be shaken by doubt, and silence would be broken by truths too heavy to ignore. And in those trials, they would discover whether resilience could truly defeat the shadows of the past. The weight of silence. The morning sun filled Anna's apartment, but instead of warmth, she felt a cold heaviness inside. She had barely slept, her mind replaying the photo she had received. The thought that someone had been watching her and Keanu in such a private, gentle moment made her heart pound with unease. She sat on the couch holding the phone in her hands, staring at the image until her eyes burned. Part of her wanted to delete it and pretend it had never arrived, but another part knew that running from shadows only made them grow darker. Keanu arrived at her door not long after. He carried 2 cups of coffee, the kind gesture that seemed so ordinary, yet in that moment it was the only thing that calmed her. She opened the door and tried to smile, but he saw through it immediately. Setting the cups on the table, he sat down beside her. "Anna," he said softly, "silence can protect you, but it can also trap you. You cannot let fear steal your voice." She wanted to believe him, but the years of carrying fear in silence had made speaking feel like walking on fire. As they sat together, Keanu shared a story from his own life. He spoke about the years when he carried grief in silence, when people thought he was strong because he did not break down in public. But inside, he was fighting battles no one saw. "I thought silence was strength," he admitted. "But I learned it was also a cage. The day I started to share, the cage began to open." His honesty struck her deeply. She realized that he was not trying to rescue her, he was showing her how to rescue herself. Later that day, they decided to walk through the city. The streets were crowded, voices overlapping, cars honking, lights flashing, but Anna felt strangely invisible. She was surrounded by people, yet alone with her thoughts. Keanu walked close beside her, not speaking, just offering his quiet presence. Sometimes silence between 2 people can be heavy, but with him, it felt safe. Still, her eyes kept scanning the crowd, searching for the unseen figure who had sent the photo. Every stranger's glance felt sharper, every step behind them felt suspicious. She could not escape the feeling of being watched. Suddenly, in the middle of the crowded street, her phone buzzed again. Her breath caught in her chest. Another message appeared, this time with a chilling line. "He cannot protect you." Her hands shook and she showed the phone to Keanu. His eyes hardened, but he placed a steady hand on her shoulder. "This is not about me protecting you," he said firmly. "This is about us standing together." His words carried a strength she had not expected, and for a moment, the fear inside her began to shift into something else, a determination she had long forgotten. That evening, they sat by the river away from the noise. Anna confessed something she had never told anyone before. She spoke about the first time she had felt truly broken, the first time she realized that people could use love as a weapon. Her voice trembled, but she did not stop. She let the pain spill out, as if the river could carry it away. Keanu listened quietly, his eyes soft but strong, as if he was holding every word carefully so it would not break. When she finished, he did not try to erase her pain. He simply said, "Your story does not end with what they did to you. It continues with what you choose now." Anna looked at him, tears on her face, and for the first time she felt that her silence was not weakness. Her silence was waiting to be broken, and maybe this was the moment. She realized that the messages, as cruel as they were, had forced her to confront the past she had buried. And with Keanu by her side, she felt she could finally face it. But the path forward would not be easy. She knew the person in the shadows would not stop. And soon, those shadows would test not only her strength, but also the bond she was beginning to build with Keanu. The night grew darker. The city lights reflected in the river, and somewhere in the distance, unseen eyes still watched. The silence between Anna and Keanu was no longer heavy with fear. It was heavy with the promise of what was to come, a storm that neither of them could yet imagine, but one that would change both of their lives forever. The test of trust days passed, but the tension only grew heavier. Every time Anna checked her phone, she feared another message. She tried to distract herself with work, scripts, and meetings, but the shadow followed her everywhere. The memory of that photo, proof that someone was near, made her glance over. Her shoulder in every room, every hallway, every crowd. Sleep became rare. Food lost its taste. She felt her world shrinking into a cage of fear again. But this time, there was one difference. Keanu was in her world now, and he was not willing to let her fight alone. One evening, as they sat in her apartment, Anna's phone lit up with another message. Her heart raced as she read it aloud. "He is not who you think he is." The words were simple, but they cut deep. She looked at Keanu with wide, uncertain eyes. The shadow from her past was not only trying to scare her, it was trying to poison the trust she had begun to build. Keanu noticed the way she hesitated before looking back at him, and it hurt him, but he did not show anger. Instead, he said calmly, "This is exactly what they want. They want you to doubt. They want to break the bond you are creating. But trust is your choice, Anna, not theirs." Still, her mind wrestled with the words. Doubt has a way of slipping into the smallest cracks of the heart. She remembered how many times she had trusted the wrong person before. She remembered the pain that followed when her kindness had been turned against her. Could she be making the same mistake again? She wanted to push the thought away, but it clung tightly. To clear her mind, she suggested they take a walk. They wandered through the quiet streets, far from the flashing cameras and curious eyes. For a while, it felt peaceful, almost normal. Then, from across the road, a figure appeared. Cloaked in the shadows of the streetlights, the person stood still, watching. Anna froze. Keanu stepped protectively in front of her, but before they could move closer, the figure disappeared into the night. It was so quick that Anna wondered if her fear had imagined it. But Keanu's eyes told her he had seen it too. When they returned to her apartment, silence hung between them. Anna sat on the couch, staring at the floor, while Keanu stood by the window, watching the city lights. Finally, she broke the silence. "What if they're right?" she whispered. "What if I don't know you as much as I think I do?" Her voice was trembling, not because she did not trust him, but because fear had found a way to twist her heart again. Keanu turned to her, his face calm, but his voice filled with steady honesty. "You don't need to know everything about me to know who I am when I stand beside you. Trust is not about having all the answers. It is about believing in what you feel." Her eyes filled with tears. She wanted to believe him, and deep inside she knew he had never given her a reason to doubt. But fear can blind even the strongest heart. She wiped her eyes and whispered, "I am scared." Keanu sat beside her, placing his hand gently over hers. "Then let us be scared together," he said. "Fear loses its power when it is shared." That night, as Anna finally drifted into sleep, Keanu stayed awake, sitting quietly by the window. He knew the shadows were getting bolder. He knew the battle ahead would not be easy. But he also knew that kindness, when chosen again and again, had the power to outshine cruelty. He was ready to fight, not with anger, not with violence, but with resilience and truth. Yet somewhere in the darkness outside her apartment, the Watcher was waiting. The next move was theirs, and it would not only challenge Anna's strength, but also test whether the trust she placed in Keanu could survive the storm that was about to come. the breaking point. The next morning, Anna woke to find the city wrapped in heavy clouds. The sky seemed to mirror the storm inside her heart. The messages had stopped for 2 days, but silence did not bring peace. It brought more fear. She knew too well that silence was not the end. It was the pause before the next strike. She carried that thought with her like a shadow, and even the smallest sound made her heart race. Keanu stayed close, sensing her unease. He spoke little, choosing instead to stay by her side, to remind her through presence that she was not alone. Sometimes he would tell her stories of his own struggles, of nights when loneliness almost broke him, of mornings when he forced himself to rise because he knew life demanded resilience. Those stories gave her strength, but she also feared what was to come. She knew the Watcher had not disappeared. They were waiting for the right moment. That moment came sooner than expected. Anna received a package at her door, wrapped in plain brown paper. Her hands shook as she unwrapped it, with Keanu standing close behind her. Inside was a single photograph, but this one was different. It was of her, taken years ago during one of her lowest moments. In the picture, she looked broken, eyes red from crying, shoulders slumped as if the world had crushed her spirit. Written across the photo in bold black ink were the words, "You will always be this." Her chest tightened, and tears filled her eyes. It felt as though the past she had buried was being dragged back into the present with cruel force. Keanu gently took the photo from her hands. His jaw tensed, but his voice stayed calm. "This is not who you are now," he said firmly. "This is who you were in pain, but you survived that pain. They want to trap you in a moment that has already passed." His words tried to heal, but Anna felt the weight of the photo pressing into her soul. She whispered, "Maybe they're right. Maybe I never escaped that part of me." Keanu looked into her eyes with steady kindness. "Anna, strength is not about never falling. It is about rising again. You rose, and you are still rising." Later that night, they sat together in the dim glow of her apartment. The air felt heavy, thick with unspoken thoughts. Anna turned to him suddenly and asked, "Why do you care so much? Why stay when it would be easier to walk away?" Her voice was full of both gratitude and doubt. Keanu looked at her quietly, then said, "Because I know what it feels like to carry pain alone, and no one should carry it alone if they don't have to. Kindness is not about ease, Anna. It is about choice, and I choose to stay." His words filled her eyes with tears again, but this time they were not tears of despair. They were tears of being seen, of being valued for more than the image the world had created. She reached out, holding his hand tightly, and for a moment the storm inside her calmed. She felt that even if the shadows grew darker, together they could still find light. But just as hope began to return, her phone buzzed once more. Another message appeared, and this time it was different. It contained an address. The message read, "Come alone or he pays the price." Her blood ran cold as she stared at the screen. The shadow was no longer content with threats from afar. They wanted her to face them. Her heart pounded, fear crashing into her chest. Keanu saw the message and his face darkened, but his voice remained steady. "They want to divide us. They want to make you believe you must walk into darkness alone, but you will not. Not while I am here." Anna looked at him, torn between fear and faith. She knew going would be dangerous, but she also knew she could not keep running forever. The Watcher had drawn the line, and now she had to decide. Would she face the past that haunted her, or would she let it continue to control her life? The choice was hers. But she was no longer making it alone, and as the night grew deeper, both of them knew that the next step would change everything. The confrontation. The address in the message weighed heavy in Anna's hands. She kept staring at it, her mind racing with fear and questions. What if it was a trap? What if it put Keanu in danger? What if facing the Watcher only gave them more power? Her heart felt torn. And yet, she knew the moment had come when silence was no longer enough. The past would not leave her until she turned to face it. Keanu noticed her trembling. He placed his hand gently on hers and said, "You do not have to do this alone. The shadow wants you weak, but together, we are stronger." His calm voice soothed her fear, but it also made her heart ache. She had seen kindness in people before, but never this kind of steady, unshakable kindness. Part of her wanted to protect him, to keep him away from her darkness. But another part knew that he had already chosen to stand with her. The night of the meeting arrived. The city was quiet, and the streets seemed to hold their breath. Anna and Keanu walked together, their footsteps echoing in the silence. The address led them to an abandoned warehouse on the edge of town. The walls were cracked, the windows shattered, and the air smelled of dust and rust. Fear tightened her chest as they stepped inside, the sound of their shoes crunching against broken glass. Suddenly a voice echoed from the shadows. "So you brought him?" It was low, sharp, and filled with venom. From the darkness, a figure stepped forward, face hidden under a hood. Anna's breath caught in her throat. She knew that voice. It belonged to the person who had once broken her trust, the one she thought she had escaped years ago. The Watcher laughed bitterly. "You think he can save you? You will always be weak, Anna. Nothing has changed." The words pierced her like knives, dragging up every wound she had ever tried to heal. For a moment, she felt herself crumbling, ready to believe the cruelty. But then she felt Keanu's hand squeeze hers, steady and strong. His voice cut through the darkness. "She is not weak. Surviving cruelty is not weakness. It is strength. You cannot chain her to the past anymore." The Watcher stepped closer, anger flashing in his tone. "You don't know her like I do. I know her fears, her shame, her failures. She belongs to those moments." But before he could say more, Anna found her voice. It trembled at first, but it grew stronger with each word. "You are wrong. I may have been broken once, but I am not broken now. I am not your prisoner. I am not defined by what you did to me. I am defined by how I rise after it." Her words echoed through the hollow. "Warehouse?" And for the first time, she felt the weight of silence lift from her shoulders. The Watcher sneered, but his eyes betrayed surprise. He had expected her to cower, to fold back into fear, but instead, she stood taller. Keanu stepped forward, his presence calm but firm. "You can haunt her with memories, but you cannot control her anymore. Her strength is not yours to take." The Watcher glared, but in that moment, the power he had once held began to crumble. The confrontation did not end with violence, but with truth. Anna's voice, once silenced, had become her shield. The Watcher turned away, muttering threats, but his footsteps faded into the night. The shadows he carried no longer had the same grip. When the silence returned, Anna collapsed into tears, not of fear, but of release. Keanu held her close, letting her cry against his chest. He whispered gently, "You faced them. You broke the chain. This is your victory." She looked at him, her eyes red but shining with a new light. For the first time in years, she felt free. But even as they left the warehouse, Anna knew the journey was not over. Freedom was not just about facing the past. It was about choosing every day to live beyond it. The Watcher was gone for now, but life would test her again, and again she would need resilience, humility, and kindness. Yet she was no longer afraid. She had found her voice, and she had someone by her side who reminded her of her worth. The light after shadows, the night after the confrontation, Anna sat by her window again. The city stretched before her, alive with lights, but for the first time in years, the weight on her chest had lifted. She remembered the words she had spoken to the Watcher, words that once seemed impossible to say. "I am not your prisoner." Those words echoed in her heart now, not as fear, but as freedom. Keanu entered quietly, carrying 2 mugs of tea. He placed one on the table and sat beside her. He didn't speak at first. He simply looked out at the city with her, letting the silence be soft instead of heavy. Finally, he said, "The shadows will always try to return, but now you know they cannot control you. You took back your voice." Anna turned to him, her eyes glistening. "I couldn't have done it without you." Her voice was gentle but certain. Keanu shook his head. "You had that strength inside you all along. I was only here to remind you of it." His humility made her smile, a small smile that carried more meaning than words could hold. In the days that followed, the messages stopped. The Watcher disappeared, leaving behind no more threats, no more chains. But Anna knew it wasn't the disappearance of the Watcher that freed her. It was her choice to confront the pain and speak the truth. She felt lighter, as if she had opened a door that had been locked for far too long. She began to return to her work with new energy. On set, she carried herself differently, not as someone hiding behind an image, but as someone unafraid to be human. People noticed the change. There was a new depth in her performances, a new spark in her laughter. She no longer feared being vulnerable because she had learned that vulnerability was not weakness. It was the bridge to real strength. Keanu remained by her side, but never in a way that overshadowed her. He continued to offer kindness in the smallest gestures, listening when she needed to talk, walking with her when she needed silence, reminding her that resilience was a choice she could make every day. She admired his humility, the way he carried his own scars without bitterness, the way he turned pain into compassion. One evening, as they sat together watching the sunset, Anna whispered, "You made me smile again. Not just on my birthday, but every day since. You reminded me of who I really am." Her voice trembled, but this time it was not from fear. It was from gratitude. Keanu looked at her with the same calm eyes that had carried her through the storm. "And you reminded me," he said, "that kindness still matters, even in a world that tries to break it." Their bond was not about grand gestures or headlines. It was about respect, humility, and the quiet strength of standing together in the face of shadows. As the sky turned golden, Anna felt a deep peace. The story of her pain was not erased, but it was no longer the only story. Now there was a new one, a story of resilience, of healing, and of kindness that refused to be silenced. She realized that her birthday had not been about surprises or gifts. It had been the beginning of something greater, the courage to face her past and the strength to walk into the future unafraid. And with Keanu beside her, she knew that even when shadows tried to return, there would always be light strong enough to break through.